The good old theme from KINER'S Corner. Gotta love that. Well, for you guys that are just popping in, this is now episode 2 of Down on the Korner, and we are thrilled tonight to welcome live from down in Port St Lucie, 3-time 30-30 man, 2-time world champion. Also that kind of bridge from the 86 to 2015 Mets, because he really was the guy that mentored and had a huge part in Captain America David Wright's career here in New York as well. And he's now doing it now for hopefully the 2023 maybe world champion New York Mets, which would be pretty cool. So Hojo, first thing I got to ask you is, the more I thought about this, I'm looking and I'm thinking of a 22-year-old Howard Johnson who had made his way through the Tiger system, single A, double A, triple A, gets to the big club. And that big club, if I remember that year, had Enos Cabell at first, Sweet Lou, Alan Trammell, and the veteran Tom Brookins, who had been there since 79. You take a look, Rhett Batty is kind of in the same situation. And then throw in the fact Sparky Anderson was a veteran type guy. He didn't like a lot of young guys in the lineup. And Buck isn't opposed to having young guys, but he's also, tends to, look, Buck wants his championship. So he's going to go with proven veterans. What's the advice you gave guys like Batty and Vientos and Ronnie Mauricio?
Well, first of all, it's good to be with you, Mark. Excited to be on the KINER'S Corner, the new corner. So you hit it right on the head. I think for me at that point in my career, I was just happy to be in the big leagues, but there was a lot of uncertainty that revolved around Sparky and how he was going to use me. It's just one of those things that I had to deal with myself. I had pretty much internally, not something you could just go out and try to, I'm not going to go to the manager's office and ask him, questions like that. It's about playing time or usage or whatever. My job was to be ready from the first pitch on, right? And however he was going to use me. There were lots of times where he started me in a game and after like 1 or 2 at bats pulled me out because they switched pitchers or something. So there's always that possibility that could happen. Buck, I think, like you said, he wants his championship. Hopefully they get it. They got to get there first. That's going to be the key. I think that Buck will put the team in position to win every night in the right way. I mean, he proved that last year. He's proved it everywhere he's gone that he will do those things. And being around him this week has been great for me because I get to see it up close. How he communicates with the coaches, how he communicates with the players, how everything is kind of like crescendoing, if that's a word, towards the end of the spring when hopefully your team is at their best, because that's the whole key. You don't need to be great now. You need to have all these things figured out. The formula, what's the formula for the Mets to win this year? It always starts with pitching, but there's got to be more. And then make sure that when spring training is over, that everybody understands what, this is how we're going to win games. That's the way it was with the Tigers. And that's one thing I learned, was that there is a formula for winning. It's not just, you throw the best guys out there and you just go play. That's not it. Even though it looks like that on television sometimes, but it's not. There's a formula for winning. And every team I've been on, the Mets were the same way in '86. Every team I've been on that won had that formula.
It's interesting because, Buck is a guy, check your ego at the door and really, everyone's there to win. But as a young player, you also really want to make that team. And you take a look at a guy like Ronnie Mauricio, who's having an unbelievable spring. Every game he's doing, something that opens up eyes. How difficult would it be for a kid who's, been around? I mean, he's been there for a while, similar to the way Wilmer Flores, you just think these guys have been around forever because they really have. But how long do you think a kid like that, starts to get a little discouraged if, he can't get in on the team? Because listen, you want a kid like that to play every day so he can develop more. But when a kid comes knocking on the door like that and having a spring like he does, how do you send them down?
Well, it's a great question. It's a great hypothetical that could happen, right? A kid like Ronnie Mauricio, I just love watching this kid move. I mean, he's like a gazelle out there. He's big. I never seen a kid that size move around like that at shortstop. His actions are ridiculously good. So it's been fun to watch him. Here's the scenario. So when I was his age, he's 21, I was 21 when my first big league camp. And I went through it, doing well, had a good camp. I was the last guy cut from the roster before the season started in 82. They said, hey, we're going to send you AAA. I said, fine, I no problem. I'll go down there and play. I was there one day, one game, and like 2 or 3 guys got hurt the first week, and they called me up after one game in AAA, me and another guy, Glenn Wilson. They called us both up to fill, and I was the leadoff hitter the first night, and I was in right field to start the game. But you just have to go down and do what they ask of you, right? It's not the time to, or it's never really the time, but that is definitely not the time to get down yourself or to feel like you're being screwed in some way, fashion. That's not the case. Big league roster is about numbers. It's about who's available, who's not, who's hurt, who isn't. What is the plan? Obviously, you want your young guys to play, and Ronnie Mauricio is no different. You want him to play, just like you want Beatty to play. You want Vientos to play. You want all these guys to play. You want Alvarez to play. So that you have to figure out, like, okay, what can we afford to keep them up here and not play them every day? What is the best for them? And then ultimately, really, what's best for you as your team, if you're in that position, that you have a chance to win. So hopefully the young guys understand that it's not a personal thing if they send you down. All that means is you got a dang good team, all right? And your job is to be ready when they call you, and that's it.
I know that Russ, because of the new rules and because you were a 3-time 30-30 guy, is chomping at the bit to ask you about base stealing. So go ahead, Russ.
Yeah. Hey, Howard. You were a 30-30 guy, and we're all talking about how the Mets maybe could steal more bases. And I brought up Jeff McNeil, who's a guy who really doesn't get caught. You didn't get caught much either. Like your best year, you had 41 steals. You only got caught 8 times, but your percentage was good. I'm wondering if you've been passing on any of that knowledge to anybody, because we'd like him to steal more bases.
Yeah, I think that the totals will probably go up, Russ, because of the throwover rule. Maybe even the slightly bigger base might even have an impact. You just don't know. A lot of plays are, bang, bang. As far as base stealing goes, I share my opinions or my ideas about technique. Really, when it's brought up to me, I don't try to go around. If I was coaching them, and that was part of my responsibility, I would definitely be all over it. And don't get me wrong, there is a mechanic to doing it correctly. And there's a mechanic to being a highly successful base stealer. I was not the fastest guy, I can tell you that right now, but I would mechanically, as a base stealer, I would put myself up against anybody. And so that's something that I studied and worked on, and I believe in the process. So whenever I talk to a young guy, I'm speaking about, base running or whatever, and I talk about base stealing does come up, I will explain some of that stuff to them about, what your responsibility is if you want to be good. But number one, it starts with a mindset. If you don't have the mindset to do it, you're not going to do it. So that's the way I look at it.
Before we go to John, because I know he's got a follow-up on Ronnie Mauricio, because Russ just brought up the base stealing, was down in Port St Lucie and speaking to, like Jeff McNeil, I think Brandon Nimmo is a guy who has tremendous speed and he's top of the lineup. And I asked him about it, and he said And this is where, I'm still a little old school, and sometimes I don't believe the numbers. And what, Brandon said to me, he said that it's proven analytically, if you are not an 80% success stolen base guy, you're hurting your team. And
No
he told me
chance.
that, so he basically went on to explain, he said, listen, he can score, he can go first to third on a single. He says it because of his speed. So he said, if he's going, gets caught, he's not on base for the big boppers behind him. I disagree with that. For someone who played the game and understands it, when someone throws that, the modern ball player throws that statistic to you, what's your answer to him?
My answer is simple, that you can't look at it strictly as if 80% is the number they come up with, and that's the number they come up with. I think it's BS. You don't want to be 50%, put it that way. You should be 70% or better. Okay, I think I was a 75% lifetime. All right. The key is understanding what has to go into a stolen base. What are the effects of you being a runner? Okay. If I'm playing the infield and Vince Coleman is up, that affects the way I play defense. If he's on first base, that affects the way we cover the bag or determine who is covering, pickoffs, all that stuff. It's all factored in. It has to be. And not only that, but when you have a guy on base that can run and is a threat, and the other team knows that could happen, the pitches that the hitter gets become better because they don't want to fall behind. They want to throw fastballs. They want to get ahead and get out. So it makes the hitter have a better opportunity to put the ball in play hard. Okay. You can't just say, well, you got to be 80%. There's way more in there. For example, this too, Mark. So think about a bunt, right? Guys don't want to bunt nowadays. Very few guys do, but some of them do. What is the effect of you trying to bunt? Well, the defense certainly has to shorten up and play, right, for the bunt. So that analytically would give you more chances to get hits because they are playing shallow. All right. The pitchers understand might be bunting, so it's going to affect the pitch selection that they have to throw. So they're probably going to be throwing more fastballs most of the time. Anytime you can put a doubt or that you might do something, it's worth it. And that, to me, that was the thing. Brett Butler was a great bunter, but he was not a very good base stealer, but he was a great bunter. I think he's more like 50-50 his percentages. And playing third base with Brett Butler up there, man, I had to play way in because that guy's going to bunt. He's going to bunt once a game at least. And I knew he was going to do it. And if I'm a base stealer and they know I'm going to be running, then I'm trying to push that envelope to get into scoring position for my team, right? I mean, gosh, man, it puts so much pressure on the defense, the pitchers, the catcher's got to call the right pitch, all that stuff. It helps everybody on your team.
Yeah, those are things that you can't quantify, and I agree with you. And just to put a number, right, I agree. And in some ways, it's changed the game, analytics, in some ways for the good, some ways for the bad. And the fact, those 30-30 guys, they're never going to be around anymore. It's unbelievable, let alone 40-40 guy.
Well, you can't use analytics as a predictive. I don't know the word I'm using, but you can't use it to predict what's going to happen because it's impossible. There are way too many factors involved in all facets of whatever you're trying to put a number to.
Absolutely. All right, Johnny, I know you had a question, so go ahead. You want to talk about Ronnie Mauricio? Got to unmute, Johnny.
Well, no, sorry about that. All right. Thank you guys, and thank you, Howard, for joining us and hanging out with us. Sure. When you were talking about Mauricio and you were talking about it being a numbers game with him, I keep thinking, he's in such a precarious situation because they've been hesitant to teach him another position. They've had him play shortstop in the minor leagues, but you got Francisco Lindor. But he's been hitting the ball all spring, knocking it around the park. And when you were talking about Mauricio, my mind, for some reason, and it's because he was a teammate of yours, my mind kept going to Kevin Mitchell, a guy that played 7 positions and hit well enough to be a contributor for your team in '86, and I don't know if it might be apples and oranges, especially if he hasn't really learned any other positions. But can you at some point see Mauricio be that Kevin Mitchell guy, maybe as soon as this year, if he can adapt to different positions this year to get his bat in the lineup, and have him stay with the big club and like you said, and beat that numbers game, as you called it?
Yes, certainly great question. Certainly a possibility. I have not seen him anywhere but shortstop, but I believe that just some of the stuff I hear that, they may ask him to play third. They may ask him to play a different position. They may have to move somebody to the outfield. I think that stuff is still up in the air. And usually what happens, those things work themselves out. If Ronnie Mauricio continues to have a great spring and forces his way in some way to the club or be the first guy up, right? I mean, we don't, at this point, you don't know what Beatty's going to make the club. You have no idea. We don't know about, Valencia. We don't know about all these guys, right? So that stuff works itself out. He may have an injury. You just don't know. But I think if that is actually a possibility of him playing another position, then we'll probably start to see some of that work happening in the spring. Because the last thing you want to do is put a kid in a position that he's not prepared at least some way to help the team, because he can only hurt the team if that's the case.
It's so funny, John, that you bring up, and we kind of show our age when we start pigeonholing players as other guys. Because me, Brett Beatty, I kind of look at as Dave Magadan. He was blocked at first base with Keith, and he was blocked at third with Ray and Hojo. But eventually he became a very, very good Major League Baseball player. I have one more question for you, Hojo. We don't want to keep you long. We know it's been a really busy week, so I'm going to ask you one more question, and we want to open it up to the room, because that's really what the essence of these shows going forward are going to be. We want the fans involved. We want them to ask their questions and have access, and we want to talk about games during the season and such. Mm-hmm. So the one question I have for you is, listen, when I was down there, obviously Carlos Beltran was down there being introduced, the assistant to Billy Epler. There's been, David Wright was there. This week, you and Straw are there. I'm just wondering, back in the day, did Davey Johnson, I remember kind of in some ways, I think Sandy Koufax used to show up every so often. But back in the day, were there players that came and spoke to the team? And what did that mean to you as a young player, seeing a former player in camp?
Yeah, Maury Wills showed up a couple of times. He was a guy that came to camp and walked us around the bases talking about base running. And I thought that was very instructive, because, there's so much information out there that you want to hear what's really important from the guys who did it. And that's why analytics can be a danger, because there's so much information that comes from it that you have to be able to sift through it all to get down to what's really important. And the guys who actually play the game and understand it, the analytic part of it and the game part of it, not everything is good for consumption. You know what I mean? It's not. You can't. It's almost like you have to translate it. And so when Maury Wills was down there, he used to talk about base running, base stealing, bunting, all these things. And I was just like in awe, like, yeah, this is the way I want to play. This is the National League way of playing. And I was all in. So when I got traded to the Mets, I was like, yes, because that was more of my game. I stole bases in the minor leagues. I would push the envelope. I tried to make them pay if they walked me. That was my mindset. And so, yeah, we had guys come in. We actually had some sprinting coaches come in, guys that used to train Olympic players, right? Olympic sprinters would come into camp, and they go over, running down the line. There, certain technique and stuff that helps. So anything that we could get out from outside that was sanctioned by the ball club was a good thing.
So guys that are watching on the Zoom, if you have a question, use the raise hand and I'll call on you and we'll go that way. So all you have to do is back on the bottom. It's the reactions, I believe, is raise hand. If you use that, or if you can't find it and you just want to raise your hand, that works as well. I can see you. And so again, this is, we want this to be the voice of the fans, and you get the opportunity to talk. Russell raised his hand. So Russell, unmute yourself and fire away.
Yeah. So, simple question. It might be a little passe and you might be sick of this, but I'd love to get your opinion on the pitch clock.
Okay. Well, what do you think I'm going to say? Well, I could tell you that I'm more of a purist when it comes to the game. I'm not a fan of you have to throw in a certain amount of time. The only way it's a good thing, I'll tell you this, is if attendance goes up, that people are watching, I'm all for it. Okay. I'm not even a fan of interleague play, but if that's what brings people to the game, I'm all for it. I think the players, in the minor leagues, they've had a pitch clock for several years now. So a lot of the guys who've been in the minors are very comfortable with it. It's the older guys who have not been in the minor leagues in a while, guys like a Verlander, Scherzer, those guys. The pitch clock may be a little thing that they have to work through or figure out. I did hear that from somebody the other day in practice was they were talking about Verlander. He's trying to game it. He's trying to game the system in some way, right? So that's a good thing. Me and Mookie would be talking on the bench all the time during the last few days. And we're like, man, if there's a rule out there, you got to try to figure out how to exploit it. And so that's the way I would be looking at it as a player. How can I exploit the rule?
And Buck is a master at that. But, I took a lot of heat about this on Facebook. I know that John and AJ from our site did two guys talking about the rules. For me, baseball's, granted, it's the only sport that doesn't have a clock. We get that. But to me, players always had an internal clock, and somehow that started slowing down. Like, listen, I don't think anyone pays to see Chuck Knobloch step out of the box every single pitch to readjust his batting gloves. Games back in the day when I started watching were 2 hours and 25 minutes, 2 hours, 35 minutes. They were never 3 hours and 40 minutes. No. I think we're going back to that 2 hour, 40 minute, which is a real sweet spot for a game. And your offense is up, time is down. I am not so against it. And when I spoke to all the Mets pitchers in Port St Lucie, because sports is so analytic, it's each and every one of them, they have a baseline going into spring training of what their normal in-between pitches were. And 90% of them were right at the 15-second mark. So yeah. I think it's more of just a batter stepping out, readjusting, cleaning their cleats. And I'm fine with not seeing all of that. But I did take a lot of heat about that. Don't put a clock on it, whatever. Steve from Steve has been very helpful growing our group, so I obviously have to call on him. So Steve, go ahead. Let me.
Who am I talking to? No.
Hey, what's up? What's up, Steve?
How you doing, brother?
What's up, buddy? Good to see you.
So, what are you seeing from the guys that maybe struggled a little more last year? They brought in Russ. And that didn't work out too well, but he's still in camp. Yep. As well as, even Escobar, he only had one good month. Prior to that, he struggled. Vogelbach, with his weight loss, did he vastly improve? What are your thoughts on all that?
And throw in Tommy Pham in that group too.
Yeah, Tommy Pham. Yep. There's a few guys, right? Every spring you have guys that are kind of in that mix, right, of struggling the year before, new stuff happening, surgeries, different things, right? So it'd be a little unfair to me to go too in depth, only because I wasn't there last year, so I didn't see up close how Vogelbach went about his business, or Tommy Pham, any of those guys. I couldn't see it, so it's harder for me to speak on it. But I will tell you that from a player who had good years and then bad years, right? I was kind of like the on-off situation. It used to frustrate me, but I knew that after a bad year, the next year was going to be a good year. And so that's what I would take, some kind of solace in, is that the guys who did struggle last year, hopefully they do better this year. I think this is the first time I've been around Russ, so I've been watching him go about his business, and he's going about it. But Buck and those guys are the ones that know way more than I do. To be fair, I don't want to say anything that I shouldn't. So I think at this point, the WBC is probably good for a lot of guys, because it's gonna open up an opportunity to play more and get those at bats in spring training that you need.
So Ravi's got his hand up as well. So Ravi, go ahead. You can go.
But I don't have a question. Okay.
Oh, okay.
All I do is I have a comment. I'm absolutely fascinated by this discussion. Looking forward to more discussions. Hojo, on behalf of the DC Mets, we are beyond excited to host you in May here in DC.
I'm excited to be up there.
Beyond honored that you got an ability to spend some time with all the fans as we take over the Nats Stadium, to see what a real takeover is all about, and just show our appreciation, our hospitality, which is what we're known for, and our love for the Mets. So this has been just a thrill to hear you speak about the Mets and what it is you're doing, there in Port St Lucie, and contributing, your way. It's absolutely beyond fascinating.
Thank you very much. I'm glad that you find it fascinating, because when I look at the team, I look at players, and I can see how coaches are working with players. So I ask a lot of questions. I ask the offensive guys about the guy's swing or what they're working on. I'll ask the defensive coaches what they see with the base running, or talk to Mookie. So it's all about, getting more information so that we can formulate a good opinion. Now, they're not going to ask me my opinion. The opinion that matters most is Buck Showalter. And so I think Buck uses everything that he feels like he needs to get right, to come up with a solution to his issues. And fortunately, right now, he's got good issues, right? He's got good problems to have. And that's what you want. So gotta hope and pray, right, that no injuries this spring, that everybody comes out of the WBC, 100%, that there's no issues, right? And then I promise you, Buck will have the guys ready to go.
So I'm going to ask you one question before we let you go, and really appreciate this. And hopefully during the season, as you're part of the KINER'S team, you'll be able to hop on, and
yes,
talk, what's going on. But this particular question in the past has gotten guys like Mookie Wilson, Gary Carter, Wally Backman in trouble. I know for a fact that, watching the game today, you were interviewed in the dugout. Before we went on, you said you just love being in that dugout. So it leads me to the question, you're such a terrific baseball mind. Can you see yourself as a manager somewhere down the road?
Oh, geez. Yeah, I guess I could. I mean, supposedly, yeah. I mean, it could happen. I'm not actively, lobbying for anything. The way I look at my coaching life is I'm on a journey to learn as much as I possibly can about the game. In any facet, any way I can be better. That's just the way I'm wired. That's probably something I learned from my parents, right? If you want to do something, you got to be good at it, right? You can't just go at it halfway. And so I'm a student of the game, and I love the game of baseball, and I teach it, and I teach kids, and I teach adults, and I teach major leaguers. I teach minor leaguers. And I feel like I have a lot of knowledge that, I could throw it up on people, right? That's not the way I do things. I try to be very succinct, to the point. This is what I see. This is my thoughts about how to fix what I see. But everything happens based off of what feedback I get. because I want to know how guys think. I want to know how players think about what they're doing. And as soon as I understand their motivation and how they think about stuff, then I can come up with a really good idea. So when I managed the minor leagues, I had good success because I took the time to learn my players, and I tried to apply the same things that I learned as a coach to being a manager. And that was to find out as much as I could and then put guys in the right position. Put them in position to be successful. There's no way I'm going to ask somebody to do something that I know that they're going to struggle with. And there is such a thing in pro ball as being overexposed. And all that means is that you're a good player, but the more you play, the more you get exposed, the worse you get. And that's going to happen, right? That's especially nowadays with all the video that's out there. You could pull up at bats and everything from years ago, right? It's incredible what you can find on the bat system, which is the system MLB uses. And there's other ones. True Media is out there, Bloomberg. There's other places, but yeah, that's how you do it. You just try to be to the point and be right. Like, I'm not going to try to fool anybody. I'm not going to try to fool a player by saying some kind of cliche. If I'm asked a direct question or if I'm asked an opinion about something, I don't want to just be cliched. I want to give them a good answer, because you can't fool players. They need to trust me. And so the only way I can be trustworthy is if I'm honest, right? And I give them good answers. And that's what I try to do. So as a manager someday, yeah, it could happen. You never know. I love the game, and we'll see what happens. You just never know. But in the meantime, I'm very, very happy doing what I'm doing. And this way I get to kind of be in both worlds. You know what I mean? I can be in the dugout. I can be with you guys. I can be honest. I can give you my opinions, and I'm not going to get anybody in trouble.
So I got one more, because it triggered when you said you're on a journey and learning as much as you can, and talking about the at-bat system. And I remember, I don't know what year it was, you used like a light system for reaction at third base, like depending on the color, and you would have to get the actual ball based on the color, and that was technology back then.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering your journey, everything you've learned now. If you were 22 years old now, what do you think the arc of your career would be now?
Well, that's a tough one. The honest to God question that I ask myself, I've asked Mookie. This is kind of rhetorical. Go, Mookie, considering everything that these guys have to do to play the game, all the technology that's thrown at them every day. Okay. The fact that you can look up all your at-bats and watch them over and over and over again at will on your phone anytime. Do you think we could have played in today's game? Seriously, do you think we'd be considered the size of some of these guys, right? Do you think we'd still be considered prospects or somebody that could be a major leaguer? To me, that's a great question to ask veteran players. Anytime you have players on here and you ask them that, what they would think about themselves in today's game. So for me, I think I'd be just fine offensively, because the harder guys threw, the better I was. And those guys get proud of that fastball, and they're going to try to get you with it. So I'm more than happy to break some hearts along the way. And then, of course, base stealing stuff is always going to play. Defensively, I think I always viewed myself as someone who had to improve. But when you look at now, and you look at then, and then you look at 20 years before me, could those guys actually be prospects in today's game? All chubby and coming to spring training just to get into shape. Now these guys come in, they're like sculpted, statues of David out there. That's how good they are. So I enjoy being around it. I like to be around the best. And I learned a long time ago, if you want to be good at something, find the people who are good at it and hang around them and ask them questions and let that rub off on you. I'm telling you, that's a great piece of advice.
How did Mookie answer your question, though?
We both laughed at each other. We were not sure. We think so. I mean, we were being judged by the only way you could judge. See, the thing that bothers me about some of the analytical stuff is this, and I think fans would understand. So the game can get a little bit tedious and numbers, driven. A guy, it's a home run. You see launch angle, you see exit velocity, you see all these things, right? Degree of, exit. All of a sudden now that becomes the goal. That's not the goal. The goal is to get a result. Nobody's going to care if they get that runner on third base and you fist one out into the outfield to drive the run in, or if you hit a rocket line drive at the second baseman and he catches it. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter how you do something. It matters that you did it. And so that's what players have to always keep in mind. I think that's the only issue I have with technology, is that sometimes players lose balance there and they start to train to the number as opposed to train to the result. And that's the thing that I think I feel like I can explain to young guys when they get lost.
Absolutely. Great stuff, Hojo. And when you triggered that, like, I would love to see if a modern day scout, if he went to watch Tony Gwynn, what his scouting report would be with Tony Gwynn.
It's incredible. When you start asking yourself those questions about players that were back, 15, 20 years ago, it's amazing some of the things you think about, like what would somebody say, right?
Right.
Who would know?
Yeah. Exactly. Hojo, thanks. Like I said, we look forward to many discussions through this year. Second episode in the books, is how we would say. We'll put it in the books. Great stuff. We appreciate everyone that's, we're only a month, we're not even a month into this whole new project, and we appreciate you guys helping us grow. I mean, each and every day we're growing by 100 members, and I know this was a last minute thing. We wanted, Hojo's fresh there. We wanted to get his take from Port St Lucie, so there'll be a lot of that. So always check the Facebook page, because we'll drop stuff last minute. Something big happens, we're just going to gather the troops and we're going to talk about it. So it won't always be at the end of every series. There'll be moments like this, popping up, and we appreciate it. Again, for those of you who want to put faces to some of the articles, Russ Cohen. Russ, you can raise your hand. Russ is part of the KINER'S He handles memorabilia for us as well as articles. John Coppinger, a well-known Met guy, he contributes. Charlie Sutton, who did a tremendous article on Mark Hanna and pretty much what the pitch clock meant to him. So Charlie, you can raise your hand so they can put a face to you. Charlie, Charlie's raising his hand. Charlie, you want to say something? Or hold on, Charlie. You want to speak, or you just raised your hand?
No, the proverbial hand raised. I appreciate the nice word.
He's a young guy, so he followed directions. He actually raised his hand.
He actually raised his hand.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I got everyone. All right. And Jim Cerny was, we'll be rotating Jim Cerny, Howie Carpin, and AJ. We're not here tonight, but they'll be here in the future when we do shows. Really appreciated everyone being here tonight. And if you missed any part of it, obviously it's on the Facebook Live. It's on the page. It will be there. We won't delete it. And we look forward. Listen, if you guys have suggestions going forward, the next Meet the Met episode drops on the 15th. We'll throw some clues out there every day to see if you guys can guess who it is. And we'll be doing one of those with Hojo in the near future as well. So have a great night, everybody. And as always, let's go Mets.